everyone, welcome to AfroHub by me, Siphokuhle Booi, an African Indigenous Knowledge Hub. In this segment, we will be having different artists, talking about musicians, painters, dancers, people that we see that they've got more of a story behind their art. We're going to be unpacking that. The reason why we're doing this segment is because we want to go through the different journeys that people go through when they have their own purposes. This will spark also on your side. Let's say like you also have something that you all of a sudden have an interest in and you don't understand why. And also you'll also be able to see the relevance of African spirituality today, not just like as something that, you know, was there a long time ago and now today in the 21st century, it's not there. No, we'll be talking to everyday people who are living this, who have their own journeys, who have their own purposes, and they will be taking us through it as to how they are dealing with things and how everything started. And through all these interviews, one thing I can assure you is that we'll be seeing a lot of similarities to people's journeys, because that's what happens when people have got a true purpose, that they normally have a little bit of similarities towards them. So enjoy the segment. I hope you guys are excited as I am, because anything to do with African spirituality, I become so excited. If you do like what you sing, don't forget to give this video a thumbs up and also subscribe. And yeah, let's get into it. In this video, we're joined by ZOE MODIGA, singer, performer, and writer. Super excited. Welcome to AfroHub.
Thank you so much. I'm very excited to be here. Thank you for having me, Siswan.
Like you know, with Purpose and Alignment, we're going to be unpacking your journey. ZOE has got an album, her second album, titled INGANEKWANE, and this is the one that will be mostly centered around today. So before we go any further, can you please give us your introduction? How would you want us to know ZOE MODIGA?
Wow, I suppose the idea of trying to introduce one person to the next can be such a complex concept. But if I were to give a very short idea of who I am, apart from being a singer, a songwriter, and a performer, I'm just also a human being that is incredibly in love and inspired by life and music, you know. But I play very many different roles in my life. Auntie, you know, I'm a daughter, and yeah, I'd like to preserve all the roles that I play in my life. Yeah.
That is so beautiful. Like here I was expecting Lucy Zilona has been working with Overtani Samazwai. She's also a summer nominee, but you're like so humble and so welcoming.
Thank you.
Thank you. And then can you talk about like your accomplishments towards like the music industry so far?
I would say my biggest accomplishment is the fact that people are moved by what it is that I make, quite honestly, because I feel there's definitely a lot of things I aspire to be. There's a lot of spaces and awards that I'd like to be recognized in. But for me, what makes me sleep at night is knowing that people are moved by what it is that I do. It's the most fulfilling thing about me. And of course, as the awards come, I will gladly receive them, and I will gladly receive what it means and what they conspire for my reality and how they open up my experience, you know.
Like but as long as we understand your sense of why you're doing this and we understand like the core of who ZOE is.
Even if you don't understand my why, even if you find your why in what it is that I do, I'm happy with that. I'm just happy to facilitate space for people. To define what it is that I do in a way that makes sense to them. You know, and if you want to know about how I relate with my work, I'm perfectly happy to share that as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. So since we're talking about purpose and alignment, before we can, you know, dive into your art and everything, can you give us a background of who, like your background, who ZOE is, how you grew up, just like how you grew up and everything.
Well, ZOE was born in Durban, and she was raised in Pietermaritzburg, Mbale 1, which is a township setting that still exists very much today, and I usually go and visit whenever it is that I can.
Yeah.
But family, really moved around a lot from place to place within the country. You know, there was a lot of moving around that we did. So I think what defines me as a person is the idea of people, and I've managed to find home in different spaces, you know, for that reason. But yeah, I would say that's how my cookie crumbles right now.
Started.
Yeah, that's really my start. Just being raised by a community of people who are very interesting characters as well. As you know as well, in a township setting, awukhuliswa ugogo kuphela osendlini, you know, ukhuliswa abantu that pass by and you greet, ukhuliswa even by the friends, makhelwane from next door, front opposite, you know, so yeah, I think in a nutshell that's what it is. But I've definitely also been groomed and raised in different ways. As much as I was raised a township, I also went emakhaya ngiyovakasha ugogo sometimes, and I was exposed to the suburban life as well. So it's a melting pot. It's really a melting pot of experiences, and I'm very grateful for that.
To be able to be like exposed to everything all at once.
Definitely.
That's really beautiful. I think especially like the part where you're like used to travel a lot, and that like how you took it so positively. Because you know, like some people, like when they grow up traveling a lot, and they tend to like close off, but then you're allowed that to, I don't know, shape you as to who you are.
Well, I think, if I really wanted to find negative aspects of moving around, I could, you know?
Yeah.
Like, for example, the idea of home, for me, is not a space. So for me, it's people, it's experiences. So for example, as much as I love going to visit Epizana, which is a kind of home for me, as much as I like to go and go Vagasha Pietermaritzburg, which is also another kind of home for me, it's more the people and the experiences. Whereas someone else is like, yo, ngifuna ukuya ekhaya, and to them that's a geographical space.
Yeah,
So I think moving around a bit has kind of shifted my idea of home being a very specific space, you know. But I think it's an interesting thing, might not be the nicest thing,
like,
but I think it's also a nice thing.
Yeah, it's really lovely. And then can you take us through like your background of African roots? I know that you grew up with your grandparents. How was that important into shaping ZOE today? Like, what were you learning?
Well, when it comes to my grandparents, one thing I can say is that Mkhulu nogogo raised me with a lot of love. A lot of love. And into engichaza ngaleyo nto is that I've never heard I love you from ugogo. I've never heard I love you from Mkhulu. But in their actions and the way that I was raised, for me, they personify what love is. Every time I feel as though I want an idea of what love is, that is the idea that I look to, because it was so pure and it was just genuine and it was real and I could feel it, you know. So that's the first thing I can really say about being raised by ugogo nomkhulu. But when it comes to things around being African, you know, it's an interesting concept, because I suppose being African is not one thing to one person. But my idea of it was that there was also a lot of Western influences in how I was raised, in the sense yokuthi masiyosonta besiyosonta emaRomeni, you know, and Christianity was the chosen faith within the family. So I was raised within that. And a lot of times mawukhuliswe kanjalo, izinto ezifana namasiko, traditions and cultures gets to be a touch and go matter. You know, you find that when people subscribe to Christianity, some are able to marry the two together, and I feel my family tried to respect certain customs, but a lot of it, I suppose, is that conflict that has been created. Because they
contradict each other.
Yes, because there are unfortunate contradictions in both those spaces. So I would say, in terms of what being African means to me, it's that experience, which is a very valid one, and a lot of people have gone through that experience as well. And I find that in my later years, I've had to be grateful for how I was raised, be grateful for the lessons that I was taught by what my family believes in faith, or what ugogo nomkhulu instilled. But I'm still very curious about what being African means, the entirety of it, what we wear, what we believe, what we do in mourning, what we do when we celebrate, how we access our ancestry. You know, those are still things I'm very much interested in that might, from time to time, be a bit of a conflict to how I was raised, so to speak.
Oh, wow. And that is the relevance of AfroHub. Oh my gosh, that's pretty interesting. So why was it important to you to speak about the African revival message? Like why this genre of music that you've chosen?
For me, it's not so much a genre thing, but it's more of the message. What is the message? And I feel you can find that message and that truth in different spaces. Yeah, but I chose this message because it just started becoming more and more relevant to me. I felt like I needed to go back to my root personally in my personal life. I feel like a lot of information about being a young black body right now was both beautiful and very frustrating. I had more questions than I had answers about you know, and I think a lot of people can relate to that. You know, you go to white schools, you assimilate to get opportunities, and you're taught by family to do that, or you're awarded those opportunities through going to education systems that give you those opportunities, but you find in turn that from iskolo sasetropeni and you're going back into a township space, there's an alienating feeling with that. You know, you don't have maybe the same experiences that your friends from next door have about what going to school is like for them, you know? So it's like all this welcoming in of the Western way of doing things it felt to me personally that I was alienated from myself, and that it wasn't teaching me to be more like myself, but it was teaching me to be less than myself, as much as it opened doors for me, you know? So it became very much like a double-edged sword in that sense, and I was just trying to conceptualize and compartmentalize all this idea about myself, but the curiosity really also just comes from a love of black bodies, you know, and who we are, and that's an exciting concept that we've seen being bastardized over and over again over a period of time. So I think being pro-black is a blessing right now, and just to create spaces for us to be and to see ourselves and to redefine what that means, you know, whilst using the information that we come from, but still having a narrative that is very particular to us as well, you know. So I love this message. I love that I'm not just a teacher, but I'm also very much learning while I'm creating and documenting what this means to me, you know. But it's so vast, it's so complex, it's so beautiful, it's exciting, you know.
Like, where did this questioning start? When, like, what was happening to you? I mean, you could have been contained with just, you know, this is how things are. Like, why unalum food toyogba? Like, no, like, who am I? Like, why do you think?
I think the first thing I can think of to answer that question is that feeling of aman. You know, the feeling of aman. It is, but it's not quite. You know, it's just like, but why is this like this? You know, and my first experience of thinking these kind of thoughts that I can think of from the top of my head was when I went to a school at Dropeni, Pietermaritzburg. And when I went to this particular school, it was known, I suppose, as a white school previously, but it was slowly integrating, and there was a lot of the population in the school that was Zulu speaking. And I remember one teacher who happens to be a Caucasian shouting at us for speaking our language. Like, for example, in the playground, or when we're asking stationery, let's say, for example, you want to use an eraser from another person in the classroom. Like, things like that. Like, we'd be called out and we'd be told that we are rude for speaking in our languages in those kinds of interactions. And Utoluguti, even what we were saying wasn't rude. We were not trying to exclude the teacher from any conversation that was happening, but we were just relating in a way that was natural to us. And we never addressed the teacher with a language we knew she could not speak, you know?
Yeah, like benizikhulumela nina.
Besikhulumela, you know? So, and I think even now, when I think of the birth of a project like INGANEKWANE, it's put me in a position of going back to the beginning. And when I think of the beginning, I think of those kinds of moments, you know. And obviously a lot of other things have happened where for example, I used to do these amazing big band gigs in Cape Town that I really enjoyed doing. And one time, you know, I was dressed up, I was still a student, and I wasn't the only person not leading, but being an act within the big band, but I was one of the people there. And when I walked into the space, someone who was hired there assumed that I was a waitress in the space, and yet people were coming to watch myself and the rest of the big band, you know. So for me, those kind of assumptions, it wasn't so much about me not seeing the importance of being a waitress, because that's a job I respect myself. But by mere fact that I'm a black woman walking into a space and you immediately assume that role over me, you know? So it's really a lot of those experiences that I think we all relate with as young black people that have put me in a space of making this message important, you know. It's all these little experiences that when you put them together, you're like, this needs to be spoken about, this needs to be investigated, these thoughts need to be articulated, because a lot of us are used to just letting these things go, right? Yeah. But now and my music doesn't really talk about those particular experiences, but it takes from those experiences to affirm abantu abafana nami, which for me is beautiful, because maybe someone else didn't go through that, but they can see themselves and relate with that. And although the music doesn't speak on it, it does affirm you as a black body. It does make you feel powerful. It does make you feel seen. It does make you feel beautiful, I hope.
Like it even makes you want to fix things.
Yeah.
Like it gives you like fire, like I'm like as black people, like there's actually hope. Like it gives you hope. You're like, okay, this is the situation now, but it can change and you can change it. So now also in your own space, you feel like, you know what, let me also fix things. Like the way that you also wanted to fix things.
For sure.
Yeah, so you're like putting it in us. So when did you start like the project of INGANEKWANE? How long did it take you?
So INGANEKWANE, in 2017, March, I released my debut album called Yellow the Novel. And I was able to really have so many doors open up to me, and I enjoyed that the world created a space for me where I could realize my dreams in that kind of way, because that album is not orthodox, you know. Some of the songs, yazi ingoma ihamba idlula 15 minutes, umuntu ayilalelile, you know. Yeah. There was just so many things in terms of how that album was made that came from such a real place, that was truthful, but that wasn't really abiding by any recording rules, so to speak, you know. Okay. And it was about self-reflection and self-introspection. And obviously, true to the theme of self-reflection, after I released the album, I was still in that space because I enjoy the space of looking into who I am. And I started having so many conversations around identity. And again, these topics come up. You know, why is it that when we walk into a space, people feel threatened? Why is it, you know, there'll be different conversations that I would have in my personal life and my professional life about it, you know? And actually, around the time that all of this was happening, there's a song called INGANEKWANE in Yellow the Novel, which is my debut album. Okay. And it's one of the few Zulu songs that are written in that album. And people would respond differently to that song than a lot of the other ones. They loved the theatrics. They loved that it was a Zulu song about heartbreak. You know, they sang along to every part. And I slowly started being encouraged by audience members, by fellow musicians, by people that I love and respect in my personal life. Bebeti, you know, Zoe, you must look into writing in your language. You know, there's something that I feel you should tap into and access there. And mina bengithatha ngokuthi there was a sense of being alienated from myself that I had felt, and a complex I was dealing with, that I didn't feel qualified to express myself in my language. Ulim Lam seemed so far away from me. And by people bringing me closer to it, I started to gain the confidence to express in it. And that's actually how this album happened. You know, I started sitting with my guitar, and it came like a flood. Like it came like an entire flood. All these songs and ideas and conversations started coming out, and really that's how the album happened.
Sure. That is really deep, honestly. Like that's really deep, and that's why I love these conversations. Like I'm a sucker for deep conversations. So right now I'm like at my happiest. So let's talk about the album art of INGANEKWANE. So you're saying like all these different songs were like flooding in, and what about the album art? Like, is there a deeper meaning to it? Why specifically this one? Like, what did you have in mind? So you do the album art after the songs?
Yes.
After the songs?
Way after the songs,
Okay.
yes.
So did you have an idea of what you wanted? Yeah, just take me through like the process of the album art. Why specifically that one?
It's the